Contact orders, the role of Cassell, the issue of shared parenting, or whether or not we should have a presumption in favour of shared parenting. We're looking at the role of grandparents, and next week we're looking at cohabitation and prenuptials. And the leader has asked me to do a green paper by the middle of this year, with a view to putting forward a number of policy options, which we will then incorporate in our manifesto. So we are open to ideas, and if anyone hasn't contacted us, please do so, because we are taking this incredibly seriously. Because you can't look at family law in isolation. One has to look at it in the context of what's happening in society as a whole. And I do commend the work done by the Centre for Social Justice on Breakdown Britain, and some of the work that they have done with the appalling situation with drugs in our society, what's happening in prisons, the cost of recidivism, around about 11 billion a year, and some of the in-depth study they've done and the statistics they've gathered together, which I think are incredibly impressive. And our review obviously is going to be in the context of what we're looking at in terms of welfare reform, obviously of the prisons, and really looking at every bit of that policy. Trying to see how departments can actually work together, because you mentioned, Roger, how departments have the tendency to work in their own silos without looking at what's happening elsewhere across government. On transparency in courts, I think it's a very good deal for the government announced, and we support that wholeheartedly. That they've adopted a lot of our ideas on that, which is good. But I'm very worried about Jack Straw's suggestion that you might try and reverse Clayton v. Clayton. I think that would be a complete disaster. And I in fact, come somewhat bruised from the Webster case, although it's North Norfolk, my constituency is northwestern Norfolk, but the Webster case was an example of a catastrophic, chronic failure by social services. And the family have had the chance to speak out about that case, which they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so if Clayton v. Clayton was reversed. And talking about reversals, I don't think you can reverse an adoption. I speak actually as a father of an adopted child, and Mr. Markai's point, there have been very successful adoptions, and I like to think that our own adoption has been a very successful one. And the idea that being in some way reversible would fill my family with total horror. But I think the Websters deserve some major form of compensation. And I think that social services who've been in total denial since the court case have got to explain what happened. And I'm in close discussions with them about that. We're looking, Roger, obviously at the whole issue of contact orders, the rights of the non-resident parent, the role of grandparents, and we're looking at CAFCAS as well. And certainly, as far as CAFCAS is concerned, I don't know whether it's been mentioned this morning, I'm sure it has, but I believe they are really a pretty crucial organisation in this whole discussion. They're not part of the MOJ, although they operate in the MOJ courts. They're obviously financed by the Department of Children, Families and Schools, and they're an organisation, when I took on this job a couple of years ago, that we were pledging to get rid of. I don't believe we should do that, and I've had various meetings with Andy Douglas, and I feel that what we should do is get them working better and more efficiently, and I think that he's doing an excellent job in pulling that organisation round. I mean, they certainly had many failures, and I want to look at the complaints procedure in place. I want to look at, for example, removals out of jurisdiction, and the possibility of having a moratorium on such removals while the complaints procedure is in progress. But there's a lot of work we're doing there, and as I say, it's work in progress as it is with the possibility of giving some idea of what grandparents should and shouldn't be entitled to, and also looking very much at what those organisations are telling us about their demands for the concept of shared parenting. I think it's a very difficult one in practice, but I think that they deserve to be listened to, and we need to examine that in a great deal of detail. Now, Roger, we heard quite a lot about what HMG is doing. I just add two additional points to what Maud mentioned. I think what is happening with NYAS is a disaster. I think that the tiny bit of money that they receive from the LSC, to take that money away, is very, very short-sighted indeed. And you mentioned, obviously, the point about about the family bar and what's happening with the family fees. And I do find it extraordinary. I mean, it's the worst possible time to be implementing the cuts to the family graduated fee scheme, but then they propose additional reductions on top of that, so that some of the payments will be reduced by 55%. I do find that really absolutely extraordinary. And on legal aid, I agree with you entirely with what you say. I think the tragedy with legal aid is that during the good times, when the sun was shining, the economy was booming, and money was being thrown around the place. You know, 120 million for doing up it was called Queen Anne's Gate, the old Home Office. It's now actually Jack Straw's changed his name to Petty France, the entrance. He's moved around, so you know, the public are confused. They think it's a new building. It's actually not. It's the old Home Office that's had this money spent on it. 150 million, 30 million originally for a new Supreme Court, going up to 60, another 30 million a year. What about the Judicial Bonds Commission? I mean, a great idea in a boom economy. But money has been poured at these different projects, and many of them are what I describe as boom time white elephants. And yet, the one budget that suffered in the FJ was the legal aid budget. And what a tragedy that we're not now starting from a base of maybe around about £4 billion. If I was coming into government, we had to win the election, with a budget of £4 billion. Wouldn't it be so much easier than starting with a budget of £2 billion? And I do agree entirely with what you have to say about the challenges that the budget faces. I think, for starters, I'd like to split the criminal and civil legal aid budget. I'd like to look at that is a hint. It's a very good way of giving a hint. But I've put my watch. I've got another couple of minutes. Don't worry. I do think that when I started looking at the legal aid budget, and it's a long time since I practiced the bar. It's over 2 years. And as I call dangerous when a former barrister who has been out of practice for all that time lecturing his colleagues on what to do. But I do find it quite staggering that 1% of all the cases take up 49% of the budget. You've got to look at those DHCCs. You've got to look at the prospect of their witnesses. And I'm looking at a lot of ideas of trying to bring new money in to the legal aid budget. I'm looking at the polluter pays principle, for example. And why, for example, if a particular regulatory authority or body or department is held to be at fault by the court, why shouldn't they pay all of the legal fees for the case? Why should it be done to the legal aid budget in many of those cases? I had a constituent come to me the other day and he told me that he was suing the council about his refuse collection. He was also suing various other people. And I said, well, you must be a rich man. He said, no, it's all on my household policy. A lot of household policies actually have a legal aid provision. And I think that there are many exciting ways of trying to bring new money into the legal aid budget. And that is certainly what we're going to have a look at with a great deal of urgency and a great deal of determination. Now, I want to say one final word about mediation and alternative dispute resolution. Because I think, in a way, we are missing a trick. Because I remember something that happened in the fag end of a government. The last Conservative government. We brought in a Family Law Act. Not a bill, an act. And I looked at this act the other day. Clause 7, reflection and consideration. Clause 13, resolution of disputes. Directions with respect to mediation. Part 3, legal aid for mediation in family matters. And so it goes on. Attendance at information meetings. But what happened to this act? I did some research on it. There's a lot here about directions with respect to mediation. Well, this government didn't commence this act. And one reason I didn't commence, I gather, was because one Jeff Hu, you probably remember him, he was once doing the job that I might do if we win the election. He was a junior minister in what was then the Lord Chancellor's Department. He brought in the Access to Justice Bill, the denial of justice bill, actually, because it removed from legal aid vast categories of